Welcome back, everyone. Please take your seats, and as you are coming in, please remember to silence your cell phones. Hope you had a good chance to stretch your legs and refresh yourselves. So, kicking off the second half of the program is Kevin Dow, Vice President and General Manager of Southern California for Turner Construction Company. He will introduce Los Angeles Mayor Eric Garcetti.
Thank you, Ivan. Good afternoon, everyone. Our next keynote speaker of the day is the Honorable Mayor Eric Garcetti. Mayor Garcetti has been a longtime partner and friend of the Los Angeles Business Council from the time he was a city council member. He was elected 4 times by his peers to serve as the president of the city council from 2006 to 2012, serving the 13th district. We have a shared vision for Los Angeles that we have integrated into our programs that sees interconnection between environmental policy, economic development, and equity. That's why we stood strong with the mayor in favor of the recently passed Measure M, expanding our public transit, creating opportunities for affordable housing, and removing cars off our roads to clean our air. And we stood against Measure S, the so-called neighborhood integrity initiative that would have prevented us from developing density and affordable housing near transit. This, our most effective way of removing cars and connecting Angelenos from their homes to their jobs. And it's also why we supported the minimum wage to ensure that not only all Angelenos have clean air, but they also do not have to decide between paying rent and buying food. For over a decade, we have partnered with the mayor on major policy initiatives, and we look forward to standing next to him at the interconnection of the Westmont Feed-In Tariff Solar Project that will be the largest in the world, over 16.4 megawatts at the Port of LA. In his recent re-election, Mayor Garcetti won by a landslide with more than 80% of the vote. The 42nd mayor of Los Angeles has made sustainability a key priority of his administration. Under his leadership, the city developed the first ever sustainable city plan, setting a course for cleaner environment, stronger economy, and increasing equity throughout Los Angeles. He has committed himself to cleaning up our utility and getting LADWP off of coal by 2025. Thanks to the great work of the mayor and his team, Los Angeles has created the most green jobs of any United States city, with over 20,000 green jobs. We have adopted the most ambitious and comprehensive energy and efficiency law for existing buildings of any U.S. city. In response to the federal government's recent rollback of climate policies, Mayor Garcetti has co-founded Climate Mayors, a coalition of U.S. mayors who are doubling down on their commitment to the environment, and they're proclaimed their opposition to repealing of the federal climate legislation and revoking commitments to the Paris Climate Agreement. Mayor Garcetti, we thank you for your leadership and your efforts to create good-paying jobs, clean tech jobs, and ensuring every Angeleno has the right to a clean environment. Please help me welcome to the stage our Honorable Mayor Eric Garcetti.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I love coming home to the Los Angeles Business Council. This is the business organization that has helped us achieve so much in envisioning this city as the city of the future, something that 6 months ago we were doing just because we play offense in Los Angeles. But increasingly, the importance of that both to play defense on what's happening nationally and to lead globally. LA's work is perhaps even more pronounced than ever before, and I couldn't be prouder to be together with all of you and with the Los Angeles Business Council, where we've tackled affordable housing and solar power and green energy and so much work together. And you really do set the bar for business organizations, not just in Los Angeles, but I believe across this country, for bringing those partnerships that explode the old myths of jobs versus the environment, or that we all have to just work in our own segmented areas. We increasingly, through LABC, and I hope through the last 4 years of my administration, have desegregated environmentalism. What do I mean by that? It used to be that those of us who were green-minded, whether it was in business or in public policy or other areas, loved to talk about being part of the environmental movement, but it was just that. It was something that was one of many movements. It was one of many issue areas. It was one of many industries. Instead of a shared value that permeates straight across all of the operations that we do in business and in government. And so what we've tried to do for the last 4 years in City Hall is to make sure that, taking the lead of what we saw the business community doing here too, is that there is no person and no entity that shouldn't be bringing that prism to refract the light of everything that we do, to make sure that, for instance, through the executive directive that I put out on environment as we launched our Sustainable City Plan, that now every single department at City Hall takes that on as their responsibility. Not just the Department of Water and Power, not just our Bureau of Sanitation, but I remember in my cabinet when I first sat down a couple months, and I bring all our general managers and chiefs together, when the chief of police said, here's your crime stats, oh, and by the way, here's your environmental stats. We've started using, both sides of the paper. We've started using PDFs. We've looked at our operations, and they actually quantified, as only the LAPD could, how many trees they had saved in the last year. And I knew that we were onto something, where it was no longer just the responsibility of them. It is now the responsibility of us. And after 8 years of very steady progress inspired by Los Angeles, by California, I know my friends Javier Becerra and Kevin De Leon spoke to you earlier. There's no place I'd rather be than right here in LA. And I believe that we inspired national action. But today we're in this era of, not just anti-science, but anti-fact. Having a march for science is as ridiculous as having to have a march for math. But we somehow have ourselves out there on the streets just to remind us that there are certain things bigger than us as human beings, like scientific laws and reality. But I don't know how to put it, how else to put it. We have folks, heading up our EPA and others who have said on the record that they don't believe that human beings have much to do with global warming. Folks who are trying to gut environmental protections. And I don't look at this just as an ideological issue, a moral issue. I look at it as a practical issue. It's here that in drought years we face wildfires that, cause us to have all sorts of negative health impacts. We see the environment. We want to have a country that, yes, of course, is energy independent, but we don't want that as mayors to come at the expense of, earthquakes in our towns in Oklahoma that have never experienced them. My colleagues in Florida who have to replace their police cars now much more frequently because of rising tides have led much more saline waters to be underneath those police cars and it's literally rotting them out. These are practical issues, too, where we have to pay the long-term costs of living cheaply in the short term. And that's why, in Los Angeles, I said very simply in my State of the City last week, we're not going to stand for this. It's why when the President issued an executive order rolling back federal climate policy, we went on the record with a joint letter to the EPA. With 55 other mayors, we wrote a letter telling the administration we strongly object to gutting critical environmental and climate policies, including the Clean Power Plan and vehicle fuel efficiency standards. This is very personal for me. And I want to thank Mary Leslie and Brad Cox and everybody who is leading, because LABC is standing with us today, sending their own letter on our behalf to the EPA today. So thank you for that support, because that takes courage in this environment to do. But we're not going to stop there, because here, when I say it's personal, we know the legacy of smog and air that choked our people. I grew up at the intersection of the 405 and 101, and on my street we had a cancer cluster, and I'm the only person in my family who hasn't had cancer yet. My mom's had it 4 times, my father 3 times, my sister 1 time. These things have a real impact on us in communities where we have gone through days. We might have a federal government that wants to return to the days of coal and smog, but here we're going to make DWP coal-free by 2025. We are taking the sort of leadership in looking at the impact from Porter Ranch to Boyle Heights, from West Adams to Wilmington, of what it means to live next to leaks and oil wells or battery factories. We're fighting for environmental justice not because it's somehow in vogue, it's a fundamental value of who we are. And we know what happens when you put the profits of industry before the health of children. That's not going to happen in our backyard. And there is no federal government that can take our will and our local power away to act. So if the federal government and the administration wants to pull out of the Paris Climate Accords, we're going to adopt them right here in Los Angeles. We're going to join together with 86 other cities. I'm the founder of something that used to be called something complicated, the Mayor's National Climate Action Agenda, blah, blah, blah. It's now called Climate Mayors, so it's easy for you to remember. And Climate Mayors went from this year after the election from 36 different cities to now 86 cities. And we're pledged to do the same thing across America. Just as we did, remember in the days, this is an old playbook, but remember when we didn't adopt Kyoto? Well, cities started to adopt Kyoto and states started to adopt Kyoto, and we said, we're not powerless. Don't cede the power you have before you exercise it. Don't despair, don't be paralyzed, just act, and dare people to stand in our way. Last week, after 16 years, we opened up a new park, the newest park in the state park system, the G2 parcel, just north of Chinatown in an area where the Zanja Madre, the first canal built by those who came before us, brought water to a thirsty pueblo and allowed this city to start to grow. Our president may want to expand drilling on our shores and our nature preserves, but here in Los Angeles, for the first time since the 1980s, we hired a petroleum administrator to make sure that those communities I mentioned can deal with the impact of oil wells in their backyard. We don't want them next to our schools and our daycare facilities, our libraries, our hospitals. And we've, made it clear here that we are not going backwards, not as a state, not as a city. And in fact, our global partners are just as strong as ever. I'm proud that it was here in Los Angeles that we had the first U.S.-China Climate Leaders Summit, where we brought together the mayors and governors of the major cities in China with the mayors and governors of the major cities and states here in the United States as part of President Obama and President Xi's historic agreement. And we've made bilateral and trilateral agreements that have nothing to do with national government anymore. It's the peer pressure of cities acting with cities. I spoke at Peking University to talk about the experience of Los Angeles and how we went from smog to clearer skies, because Beijing and other Chinese cities are struggling with that same thing here today. And as we teach those lessons, we also import technologies that they're developing in other countries, in Europe and China and other places, to help us continue to scrub our air even more. And our goals aren't just limited to implementing the right policies or putting the right ideas in place. We're here to change the hearts and minds on one of the defining issues of our time, if not the most defining issue of our time. We do have facts on our side, 99.7% of climate scientists in our corner. We have to show people how our ideas, though, aren't just about science, it's about how we are improving their lives. So I want to deliver sustainability that you can see. It's at the core of our sustainable city plan. If you haven't looked at it yet, please go to it. It was one of the boldest ever put out by a city anywhere in the world. And the idea behind it was there have been good plans in the past, but they, again, were a peripheralized part of government, shelved away, and there's no accountability. So what we put in there from the very beginning was accountability. 1-year goals, 2-year goals, 10-year goals that you could measure and then decide whether we were doing your business. And in just 2 years, we're delivering on 90% of the promises. 2/3 of the promises due this year, 2017, we delivered early. And people are beginning to feel that. Today, Los Angeles is the #2 solar city in all of America. We use the least per capita. Yeah, go ahead. We got some solar folks in the house who made that happen. We use the least water per capita of any big city in America, and even with the wettest year on record, keep saving that water. Trust me, changing that culture and even reducing just your water bill is worth it. Those are real dollar savings that people can feel and understand. In the last year, we opened 9 new parks, broke ground on 6 more, completed more than 180 park improvements. These are tangible things that you can walk your children to, that you can see in your own neighborhood. They make our kids healthier, they create a sense of community, which is an underlying value of our sustainability movement. And over the last 4 years, the thing I'm proudest of is our economic benefits. We have cut unemployment by more than half. We used to be 2 to 3 points higher than the national average, and now we're slightly under it here in Los Angeles. We've cut unemployment by more than half, but in that, 20,000 of those new jobs, a record number of jobs, by the way, in LA history, are green jobs. Green jobs through intentional work, whether it's through the Clean Tech Incubator downtown, whether it's investing in solar subsidy, whether it's looking at the water work that we're doing. These are middle-class jobs that can sustain families at a moment when our urban centers have never been more exciting places to live in, but are the most difficult places to live in economically, where a ballooning service class is barely hanging on, and thank you to the Business Council for your support of raising the minimum wage to help people like that hang on. The creative class, those of us who are reasonably well educated and innovators are doing exceptionally well, but the middle class has gotten squeezed out. And these green jobs are just what we need to continue that. And so we're working to attract more than 70,000 green jobs by 2025, powered by $750 million in new investment for Los Angeles. In fact, the report coming out today from UCLA's Luskin School highlights the wave of middle skills utility jobs that we need to fill as our aging workforce retires. And think about an environmental initiative, the largest in the nation's history, that we passed in November to build out public transportation. It was the largest public transportation infrastructure initiative in the nation's history times 2. It's 465,000 jobs. And I talk about them as environmental jobs because now somebody can have not just a momentary 2 or 3 years or 4 years of building a new rail line. We're going to have 15 new rapid transit lines built or extended in this county. And that's a lifetime, a career that we need to make sure young people growing up in our neighborhoods can prepare themselves for. What better career? You're reducing traffic in your town, you're reducing emissions in your town, and you have a middle-class career ahead of you. So we're working with our high schools and our community colleges with something called Win LA, which is our new workforce investment program from Metro to ensure that what we are doing benefits those folks whose tax dollars are paying for those expansions as well. So these good middle-class jobs that can't be outsourced when you're able to raise a family on a living wage and fighting for climate change is what LA increasingly is known for and will be known for. That's how you deliver sustainability you can feel, that you can see, that you can touch. And that's why we aren't just getting off of coal. We're charting a course to get off of carbon and be 100% renewable here in the city of Los Angeles. We're not just cutting emissions at our port and our airport. We're cutting all emissions by 80% by 2050. And we're becoming the electric vehicle capital of America. For a few of us who were the geeks who drove EV1s way back when and clung to them as they were taken away from us, it's nice to see history come back. By the way, cars started as electric vehicles way back when, long before we were alive. And here we pledged to make sure that our fleet vehicle purchases would half of them be electric vehicles. We hit that goal early, hit our 1,000 public chargers goal early. And we're saving money doing it. Our LAPD vehicles, all the non-patrol vehicles that we got this year, we leased electric vehicles. And that took a little changing of the culture downtown because governments usually say, we don't lease things, we buy them. But in the first year alone, we'll save by 40% when you combine your maintenance and your fuel costs. 40% the first year our cost of those vehicles. And, in the same time, clean the air. And we put together a consortium with my fellow mayors up and down the West Coast, and increasingly now we're looking even outside the U.S. and Canada and Mexico, to go to our EV and other automotive companies and say, we want to build, we want you to build up to 115,000 vehicles that we need and we will guarantee you a market for. And the response has been fabulous because when they see that sort of marketplace created by government coming together, local governments, again, it's an unstoppable force. So today we know that the power we have is great. We know the stats that cities are home to more than half of the world's population but generate about 70% of the greenhouse gas emissions. And so when we act here locally, we are affecting change at a massive, massive scale. But that scale is the cumulative action of individuals, of families, of businesses, of pioneers like each one of you. Whether you've pushed for something in a town hall meeting or whether you've shown up with a great new idea that was looking for seed capital. You have been the power behind this wave, and it's been my honor to just be at the very top as it crests, to be able to show people that here in this wonderful place where our mountains meet our ocean, where it is indeed 72 and sunny almost every day, although with global warming it's like 74 and sunny every day. We have the ability not only to do right for ourselves first and foremost, to bring that message and that feel of what our work means to a very personal way to our families, to our streets, to our communities, but we can have the world look at us and recognize that this is the place that's leading. And in the future, when we have these moments where the world turns their attention to us, whether it's convening leaders here, whether it's networking other cities together with us, or whether it's bringing the Olympics back home to America, which I hope in a few months we will be able to announce that Los Angeles is going to host the Olympics once again. These are moments to inspire and to show the world what sustainability is all about. As we make our closing arguments to the International Olympic Committee, and we've got a great competitor in Paris where they would do a marvelous games too, but we've said right here, we're not even building an Olympic Village. We have UCLA already there. Where we don't have to build new facilities because we have a Rams Stadium being built, and for any of you Chargers fans, I think they're playing there too. But the Rams Stadium being built, we have a new football stadium coming up. We have all these things. And what is indeed the greenest way to live is to reuse what we have. And that is Los Angeles' message, that we can be a zero waste city, we can be a zero emission city, we can be a zero carbon city, we can be a place where 100% of our water comes from local sources. And as long as we keep pushing towards that, I think we keep surprising ourselves how many jobs we create, how much easier it is to do. And my very last thing is, one lesson I've learned as mayor, when people say, what have you really learned as mayor? Is I say, the big things are sometimes so much easier than you ever imagine. And it's only been not a failure of what's possible, but a failure of our imagination to reach for it. We all know the flip side is true too, that anybody who's ever worked in government, that some of the smallest can be the most infuriating. But let's keep our eyes on the stars, and up to the stars, and keep reaching for those big things, because Los Angeles is getting that job done, California is getting that job done, and the United States needs us to get that job done so the world can see that we are the environmental leaders. Thank you all so much. Have a great day.
Ladies and gentlemen, please now welcome to the stage Glen Martin, CEO and founder of Infrastructure Energy.
Good afternoon, and once again, welcome to the LABC Sustainability Summit. It's my honor today to be introducing the keynote speaker. I'll give you a little bit more detail on Matt Arnold of JPMorgan. An esteemed speaker, and I'm actually very much looking forward to seeing his words on fundamentally the finance challenge of sustainability and how we can innovate in this space. Infrastructure Energy, are a development and finance platform based here in Los Angeles at the Los Angeles Clean Tech Incubator. We're working in partnership with a number of different North American pension funds under a public-private partnership model to develop and finance community-scale microgrid and grid modernization projects within the North American market. Our first projects in Ontario and upstate New York are coming near to first stages of implementation, and we're looking forward to proving the model out of privately financed utility infrastructure and bringing those models here to Los Angeles and to the rest of California and the West Coast. Finance innovation remains, in my mind, and in discussing it with Matt earlier, one of the key challenges of the utility infrastructure sector, how we can innovate and bring new ideas to make sure that the transition to a clean energy economy is completed in a reasonable time frame and in time to avoid the worst possible outcomes that have been discussed at some length. I'm looking forward to the panel here this afternoon. They're going to be talking about proven business models, but I do believe that there's going to be also some room for discussion of potential and new and innovative models that can be brought forward to solve some of the key challenges in financing these these important initiatives. So it is now my pleasure to introduce Matt Arnold, the Managing Director and Global Head of Sustainable Finance for JPMorgan Chase & Co. In this role, Matt leads the firm's client engagement on sustainability across all sectors globally. Formerly, Matt was Principal and Leader of Sustainable Business Solutions at PricewaterhouseCoopers and the co-founder of Sustainable Finance Limited, acquired by PricewaterhouseCoopers in 2008. He was the Chief Operating Officer and Acting President of World Resources Institute and founder of the Management Institute for Environment and Business. Matt is also a trustee of the Nature Conservancy's New York chapter and Frankfurt Zoological Society. Please help me welcome today's business keynote, Matt Arnold.
Thank you, Glenn. Thank you, Mary. And thank you all. I am sort of speechless after the mayor's talk. I've been here for 2 days, and my wonderful colleague, Carrie Doan-Decker, took me around to have some meetings with folks, many of you in this room, who do environment, sustainability, clean energy for a living. And it felt like soul food. It felt like coming home. And you only need to know 2 things about me to know why I love Los Angeles so much today. I live in Washington, D.C., and I'm the Chief Sustainability Officer for the largest bank outside China in the world. So JPMorgan has had a long partnership with the LA Business Council on a whole range of things, one that we value very dearly, and I've been very pleased in the last 2 years to form a sustainability connection with you and with them. It's really a great opportunity. I wanted to talk to you about the financial markets, and we have all this challenge in front of us. And so who's going to pay for it? And where's the money going to come from? Or, as I was on a panel at the United Nations last week on financing the Sustainable Development Goals, which is 17 important social and environmental objectives, and the moderator, my opening question was, so, you work for Wall Street. Are you going to be positive in this? Or are we going to have to drag you kicking and screaming to the table to help finance the Sustainable Development Goals, which is a really great question. My answer is a resounding yes. I got my career start at Greenpeace, so of course I deeply, personally care about this, but I work in this large institution. So we have to figure out ways and mechanisms to help drive capital towards the projects that you and your colleagues are building. But if you look across the 6 large U.S. banks, we all have major sustainability strategies, whether we frame them as a big dollar target of $150 billion towards renewable energy, whether we frame them as 100% renewable energy in our supply chains. We're all, and it's actually, we're very closely linked, and it's a very friendly competition. And it's friendly because we're all personally engaged on these issues. And their success is our success, and our success is their success. So you have the big banks, you have the big asset managers, the BlackRocks, recently the Fidelities. And what you have less of, interestingly, is the big asset owners, with the prominent exceptions of CalSTRS and CalPERS. But if you look at the UN Principles for Responsible Investing, which is kind of the body of sustainable investing for the investment community. In the United States, there are only 30 members of that group who are U.S. Asset owners. 30. So there's a long way to go with all this pension money so that in yet another sphere, the rest of the country can follow California in driving more capital towards sustainable and socially just projects. So what are we talking about? Let's just remind ourselves of the challenge. The International Energy Agency and various others put out estimates of what it will take financially to get the world's climate to stabilize at 2 degrees Celsius. And the projections use different baseline assumptions, and they're a little bit different, but we're comfortable with the notion that we need, as a globe, an additional $1 trillion per year until 2050 into clean energy supply and use. So efficiencies in there as well. And so where's that $1 trillion a year going to come from? And I just want to spend a few minutes talking about real bright spots and areas where I think that there's further work. Where's it coming from now? The earliest movers in this space have been the private equity and venture capital investors. The Bloomberg New Energy Finance estimated that last year there was about $320-odd billion of clean energy investment. And absolutely the lion's share of that came privately, through private placements, private equity, venture capital. 13 billion out of 300 plus was public markets. So the private equity world has a very strong foundation, has been at this for a long time. The Sand Hill Road crowd, all the big private equities, TPG, Blackstone, KKR, they all have capital raised and teams deployed for this sort of broad pipeline of opportunities. It is, for a young company, an expensive way to go. All the companies that come to talk to us, and we don't do venture capital investing at JPMorgan Chase, they would rather find cheaper ways of getting themselves financed in the early rounds. And we can talk about, and we will talk for a minute about impact investing. The second big bucket is green bonds. Green bonds didn't exist 5 years ago, and last year the green bond market delivered $87 billion in capital in fixed income securities to corporates, banks, municipalities for the purpose of largely renewable energy, sometimes water, sometimes rail, sometimes green buildings. And there are very healthy and ongoing debates about how green is green and should there be a gradation. There's light green and dark green. There's not been a major scandal. There's not been a coal plant financed with a green bond yet. In fact, the banks got together 3 years ago to articulate, we got together with Citi and Bank of America and Carlson, a French bank, to articulate the green bond principles so that there wouldn't be such, an aberration. And I learned yesterday that the Climate Action Reserve here is articulating a kind of a ranking. And I do think that a 2.0 in the green bond market is a light green, dark green, and then that way you could potentially get into differential return. So in exchange for a dark green bond, maybe you give up a little bit of return. That has not happened. To date, these are vanilla bonds issued by that entity, just alongside their regular debt, same terms, same interest rates, same recourse to the balance sheet. So it's not project lending. You're not getting renewable energy exposure, but you're getting a commitment that, financially you're not getting renewable energy exposure. You are programmatically. That issuer has committed that they will deploy those proceeds into renewable energy. But financially, you sit alongside all the other bonds in that enterprise. And that's one of the reasons why it's come from nothing to 100 billion. There's an estimate that it could be 200 billion this year. And at that growth rate, we can get to $1 trillion. Remember, that's our bogey. Alongside the green bonds and part of green bonds are municipals and states and governments. The whole public finance market is sort of the third big bucket of kind of green finance that we can look to Interestingly, Chinese government-owned entities are the largest issuers of green bonds. China was 40% of the green bond market last year. France has issued the largest sovereign issue at something like 7 billion euro. So governments are a big part of not just policy setters, but like LIDWP, they are executing the decarbonization of the power sector and the transport sector. A big area of work is just the mainstream capital markets. And a lot of the decarbonization of the US power, electrical, and transport sector has been untagged. It's just the utility industry doing its thing, the automotive industry driving down vehicle sizes, and we're actually setting about trying to tag that, because even though it wasn't self-declared, it's part of this trillion. And we haven't completed that yet, but it's something that I think is probably quite a big number, because most of our power sector clients don't issue green bonds, and yet they're all decarbonizing actively. They all have plans to shutter coal plants and to replace those either with utility-scale solar, wind, or natural gas. And interestingly, and parenthetically on the role of the federal government in the US power sector, its role is de minimis. And it really wasn't the Clean Power Plan that put all that pressure on coal and is killing coal. It was fracking. It's the abundant availability of natural gas that has really changed the greenhouse gas inventory in the United States. That's not stopping. And then back to California with your extraordinary renewable energy targets, it's states and cities and counties. So as I sit in my Washington, D.C. home as the Chief Sustainability Officer for this bank and wonder what if I took a wrong turn, I am kind of encouraged by that and by you. I think the biggest opportunity in this regard is public equity markets. I mentioned earlier that last year only 13 billion of the 300 odd was from public equity. So this is, think stock markets. And there's a notion called ESG, environment, social governance, and that's socially responsible. And that's sort of the community in the public equity markets that engages with these softer sustainability issues. And there is a group called the US Sustainable Investment Forum that tracks that. And Europe has one and Asia has one. And their report articulates that $22 trillion, that's a third, 30%, of all managed capital in the world is dedicated somehow to ESG. So you think, wow, why isn't our problem solved? Well, for one, there are 7 different flavors of ESG, and I won't go into them, but one of them is whether or not you vote proxies on things like diversity or board CEO chairman split and so on. So knock off half of it. So we're down to 11 trillion, but that 11 trillion is ESG integration. And what that means is the portfolio manager or investor is sort of kicking the tires. Is this company ethical? Is it the top end of its industry range for whatever behavior it is? It doesn't have an explicit social purpose. ESG integration is terrific, and there's emerging evidence that actually adds return and reduces volatility. So it may be a terrific investment strategy on its own, but it won't deliver that $1 trillion because it wasn't really designed for that. So that brings us down to yet a smaller bucket of $1 trillion, which is actively looking for a social outcome of some kind or another. Positive screening. And then finally, 100 billion, or 1/10 of $1 trillion, of impact investing that is explicitly, exclusively driving towards a social outcome. Asset-based finance, project finance. The next panel is going to talk about a whole range of business opportunities in supply chains, on solar rooftops, et cetera, et cetera. And a lot of that work will be either venture-backed or asset-backed. The big banks have pulled away from asset-based financing because we only have recourse if something goes wrong to that asset. Whereas as we've gotten less risky in the post-crisis world, we would rather have recourse to balance sheets. But that is a very rich area of structured opportunity. A big blank for me is mortgage markets, green mortgages, Energy Star mortgages. That is an area where we have not gotten to, and the green mortgage market is really an untapped opportunity. And then finally, on all this world of capital markets is blended finance, impact investing, where you can take a business or a project and layer in grants and then get some government support and then some tax subsidy and then some equity and then some commercial debt on top of that. That is a great concept. It's more than a concept. It's in action in a lot of places. But because of all that layering, it's not, you can't just bang it out. The green bonds, it's a bond. It's a bond like every other bond. You can get mainstream people across hundreds of institutions just banging those out. The highly structured transactional sorts of things will always be slower and longer and challenging for the investor. So I just want to close with a thought about the drivers and why actually ultimately I'm really optimistic. One is corporates. More than half of the Fortune 500 has targets in this area, including us. We're buying renewable energy in our supply chain. The G20, the financial regulators of the G20 got together and said, we need greater transparency and disclosure around climate-related financial risk. And so we were part of a task force that's issued recommendations to require banks, asset owners, asset managers to disclose their climate-related financial risk. We are doing that. We're going to do that later this year. But, you know, again, back to the inspiration of the mayor, my biggest cause for optimism is you in LA, in San Francisco, in Houston, in Detroit, and in the counties that you inhabit in the states, because you don't have to wait for permission, and you don't need to be told what to do. And then three last things. One is China. The green finance agenda in China is absolutely exploding. I've been to China more on green finance in the last 2 years than any other place. And the Chinese are very serious. They have a serious environmental problem. They have a serious air problem, and they're going to fix it. So that's one. The economics of renewables. We are signing profitable deals to buy wind dedicated from a wind farm for our use. And that's happening across the corporate world. So the big driver for distributed and off-site renewables right now is corporate buyers. And then finally, green buildings. Do we build buildings that aren't green anymore? We really don't. And now the economics of refurbishment are looking more and more attractive. So there's a lot of financial reasons why all those pools of capital will be increasingly focused on this area. It's a rich, rich, rich landscape. There's serious momentum. There are lots of obstacles. Washington will become one and stay one. And it will be up to you and us to get around that. So let's not let them stop us. And thank you again for being representative of such a great cause and such a great city. I'm really happy to have been here. Thank you.
Matt Arnold, thank you very much for sharing the perspectives from the financial markets, and as we continue looking at our clean energy future. Now taking the stage, next is our third panel, addressing proven models for sustainable business practice. Brad Cox, Senior Managing Director at Trammell Crow Company and Chairman of the Los Angeles Business Council Institute, will moderate the panel. But first, please welcome our panel framer, Joby Carlson, Global Director of Sustainable Energy and Operations at Walmart. Joby is responsible for managing Walmart's enterprise-wide sustainability strategies for its operations. He develops company policy and approaches related to climate and emissions, energy efficiency, scaling renewables, improving refrigeration, and eliminating solid and organic waste. Joby holds an MS in Civil and Environmental Engineering and a BS in Mechanical Engineering. We are excited to have North America's largest private employer here with us today. Please welcome to the stage Joby Carlson and our third panel.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Ivan. As we let our esteemed panel sit, thanks for the introduction. I'm Joby Carlson, flying in from Bentonville, Arkansas. Gotta admit, it wasn't hard to twist my arm to get here. Beautiful. I've enjoyed the weather and hope to some more this afternoon. But I'm going to kick things off this business panel and kind of talk to you about Walmart and why sustainability is important to us, not only from just doing the right thing, but also how it's benefited our business. So you might have heard of us. We got our start in 1962 with our first discount center in Rogers, Arkansas, and things have changed since then. We're operating in about 28 different countries and sourcing from about double that, and employing 2.3 million people around the world. And obviously, half of our operations are in the U.S., so we are very much a U.S.-focused company. And I have the pleasure of working both with the U.S. and international divisions on their sustainability strategies. In 2005, I think, was a turning point for us in how we thought about our role in society. And it started around the time of Hurricane Katrina, where we saw our customers, our associates suffering in the aftermath of that hurricane. And what we found that we could actually be one of the first responders to that event, sending supplies and using our infrastructure to really help people get back on their feet. And since then, around that same time, we realized that we could leverage our strengths as the world's biggest retailer, our facilities around the world, to help people truly live better. As you know, our motto is save money, live better. And so right around that time, we also launched our 3 sustainability aspirations. And that's to create zero waste, operate 100% on renewable energy, and deliver products that sustain people and the environment. And I'm happy to say, 10 years later, we're at about over 80% globally on waste diversion from landfills. 25% of our operations operate with renewable power. And we've been delivering more sustainable products. And we've quantified that in the tune of 35 million metric tons in our supply chains. And I'm excited to talk about what the next 10 years will hold. So we work a lot with global NGOs such as World Wildlife Fund and CDP, for example. And they did a really nice investigation looking at the top Fortune 500 companies who are reporting and disclosing emissions. And you might not realize, but what they found was that these companies are seeing a greater return on their investments in energy efficiency and emissions reductions than their actual investments. And 80%, that's amazing. They're really seeing returns. And so they also, in the same study, determined that over a 10-year period, the true opportunity available, just taking advantage of the things that have really strong ROIs, the U.S. alone could save $780 billion in avoided costs. And that's over a 10-year period and roughly $120 billion annually, which is equivalent to in total to the Netherlands GDP. And if you divide it amongst all publicly traded companies, about $52 million. And so Walmart really understands that opportunity, and we've been able to capture that. And we've done that through deploying basically 4 strategies on our own operations. That is sourcing renewable energy, going very heavy on energy efficiency. We love energy efficiency. Improving refrigeration systems in our operations, and then also improving our fleet efficiency. So I'm just going to run through this really quick. You might not know, but we've been a leader in on-site solar in the United States for over the last 4 years. We have installed roughly over 500,000 solar panels across our operations in the United States alone, which is equivalent to 190 football fields, which is more football fields than there are college stadiums in the United States. So we're very proud of that, and we're also very much can say that we either are saving money or at no cost to most of these facilities. And a majority of these are spread across 17 states in the United States, and then five international countries. And a lot of this is in California. Actually, over 60% of our facilities in California have solar on the roof or in the parking lot. Also fuel cells and other advanced technologies. We also procure from wind farms. So we have operations in Texas and Mexico and the UK, offshore in the UK, where we're procuring clean, sustainable, renewable energy from majority of wind farms. Energy efficiency is delivering big savings for our business. We've actually, since 2010, we've reduced the energy intensity of our facilities by 12%. And with lighting alone, we're saving upwards of $100 million a year in avoided costs just from energy efficiency. So these projects are paying for themselves and really delivering for the business. And then finally, fleet efficiency. Since 2005, I'm proud to say that we've doubled our fleet efficiency, meaning that we're delivering more products to our stores and shipping them to our customers for half the amount of fuel that we did in 2005, which is delivering about $1 billion in avoided costs to our business annually. So very, very big. And that didn't require a lot of capital. Actually, equipment is part of the solution, but a lot of it is just doing things better, more efficiently, looking at our logistics strategies and how we're driving our trucks. And what does this all add up to? Well, I can safely say that we've truly decoupled our business growth from impact. And we're a growth company. We're adding facilities around the world and serving our customers, and we won't stop that. But what our aim is to do that without increasing our footprint. And so here the green line is basically our retail square footage growth globally over the last 10 years. And then our carbon footprint's at the bottom there. So you can see that our carbon intensities really held our carbon footprints about relatively flat, whereas our facilities have grown or more than almost doubled since 2005. And that equates to about a 28% decrease in carbon intensity and a total of 40 million metric tons over this period. So very proud of that. And we're not stopping there. Looking forward, we just announced our 2025 agenda last fall in November. And I'm proud to say that we're the first retailer in the world to have an approved science-based emissions reduction target. And if you don't know what science-based targets are, basically that means that our emissions reduction pathway is in line with the IPCC's or global decarbonization pathway set forth by our climate science divisions. And that was a lot of effort that went into the planning and road mapping of that, and we're proud to be the first retailer to be able to say that. What does that mean? It means that we're going to have an absolute emissions reduction of 18%, which is very difficult for a growth company. 18% from where we are today. So I showed you earlier that we've held flat. Now we're going to actually take that down despite growing. Thank you. And we believe that doing things in our business is essential because it allows us to talk to our massive supplier base, right? So we've got to walk the talk before we can tell others to do the same. And so that's why we really focus on our operations first. And we're going to achieve that by getting to 50% renewable by 2025 and continuing to focus on energy efficiency and those other strategies I mentioned. But most importantly, we've committed to prevent or reduce 1 billion metric tons of CO2 in our value chain up and downstream from our facilities by 2030. And so we're actually, 1 billion is equivalent to 1 gigaton for those that love conversions and whatnot. But so we launched a program actually last week. We had a big event last week where we called together all of our suppliers, well, actually the 250 top suppliers by sales. So they're the biggest brands you've heard of. But this challenge is including all of our suppliers, and it's called Project Gigaton. And so again, the goal there is to reduce 1 billion metric tons out of our supply chain by 2030, and we're asking our suppliers to join us on that journey. And so this program is divided into 6 different pillars where we're asking our suppliers to sign up, set a target, and join us. And they can do that in the areas of energy, sustainable agriculture, packaging, deforestation, and product use. And so we see that, the end goal is that everyone should be on a science-based reduction pathway. That's what really is needed. But if they're not ready to do that, we think that everyone can do something and so in these 6 areas. So we're very excited about that program. And so this concludes my portion, but I'd like to leave you with a short video and move on to the panel next. So thank you.
We've been working together on sustainability for some time now. Some of us before
We've been working together on
sustainability for some time now. And we sometimes get asked, some of us before it was called sustainability. And we sometimes get asked, why are you still working on that? Or do you really think you're making a difference? To that, we tell them, it's been pretty good for our business. It's pushing us to think differently, to innovate. We're working with new companies and organizations to achieve things we never could have done alone. We're doing it because it's the right thing to do, and our customers noticed. But our reason goes much deeper than that. With every farm we visit, every PO cut, every product you make, every trailer load shipped, and every product we stock on the shelf, we're proud to know that our actions help families across the globe have access to products that help them live better. We can say we're taking the extra time to dig into hard stuff, working with suppliers to help make products more sustainable, to source them from better places, and delivering them in a better way. In such a way that we hope our grandparents would be proud of us, in a way that our kids might look up to us, and in a way that future generations might be thankful that we did something. So when they ask us, are you still working on that? We tell them, we're just getting started. Will you join us? Saving people money so they can live better today and for generations to come.
Thank you, Joby. Good afternoon. How's everyone out there? Awake? Hopefully. We got a great panel for you this afternoon. We're very excited to talk about the economic benefit of sustainability. This is all about jobs and how investing in sustainability is smart for business and smart for our economy. And hopefully you all stop at Walmart on your way home. So to my left on part of our panel, directly to my left is Jason Barrett with GAF. Next to him is Tom Buttgenbach with 8 Minute Energy. Susan Kennedy, who's been here and joined us before with Advanced Microgrid Solutions. Jonathan Port with PermaCity. Dr. Eric Strauss, pleased to have you from LMU today, and David Warner with Parsons. If you recall, as we talked about earlier today, the Paris Climate Agreement, California and the City of Los Angeles are very committed to the terms and conditions of the Paris Climate Agreement. Back in November, there were 375 companies, some of the leading organizations and corporations like General Mills, Nike, Starbucks, Gap, and many more, including the business organizations that are sitting here today as part of the panel, made the commitment to conform with the Paris Climate Agreement because it made for smart business. So there is this momentum here of, as we've talked about today in Los Angeles, and in particular in California, to continue to be the world leader in this area. And today we're going to talk about jobs, kind of talk about what does sustainability look like today? What does that mean for corporations like Parsons and some of the ideas and the resilient, the Eco Lab, as I call it, that Dr. Strauss is leading at LMU. So he's going to frame for us a little bit of some of the new concepts that are related to our definition of sustainability. And with that, I'd like to kick off first with David. I mean, Parsons was one of the leaders in this area of kind of redefining the goals and objectives for the firm as to what does sustainability really mean internally. How do you create a new framework to not only define your goals and objectives, but how do you create measurable action items that allow you to really determine that you are meeting those goals and objectives, and then also make that as one of your key corporate benchmarks for determining the success of the organization. So share a little bit about the thoughts and ideas that you have internally as one of the market leaders.
Absolutely. Well, it all starts with culture, and what I think is unique to Parsons is we've really established a culture of sustainability. And that doesn't just happen overnight or by just saying, hey, that's our culture. It happens over a long period of time of intentional actions and behaviors that make Parsons who they are today. Last week, like many others, we actually released a corporate sustainability report, coinciding with Earth Day, of course. And in that report, it talks about what we measure on a very regular basis. We break down the types of things we look at as both an engineering service provider and also a contractor. We look at environmental stewardship and what our role is and what we're doing. We look at the workplace, so what best practices do we do in the office, as well as when we're in the field. We also look at our staff and their credentials, sustainability certifications and things that we can do to help promote within our teams. We also look at the social responsibility that we have. So how do we give back to communities? How do we engage in our communities where we live, play, growing and families? And then we also look at the projects we deliver. So one of the most unique things that stands out in that report is that we look back at all of the active projects we have over the last couple of years, and believe it or not, 90% of our projects include sustainability goals. And I think that says something for a global company. One of the things that strikes me the best, though, or the most around sustainability within Parsons is that we've actually made it a core value. So about 5 years ago, we added sustainability as a core value. I think that was probably one of the biggest internal culture shifts that we could have done. And unique to Parsons, which I hope many companies are doing this, is we actually measure on a monthly basis leading and lagging indicators around our core values. So what that means is that core values isn't just something we hang our hat on and say these are the 6 things we live by. We actually measure ourselves. We share that with the board. We look at, for sustainability, our carbon footprint and how we measure against our goals. We look at our staff credentials. Are we increasing the number of staff that have certain certifications and the training that we need to provide our people to make sure that we're growing and advancing in that area? We look at how many projects have won sustainability goals, so celebrating our successes. And it's those type of things that I'm looking for other companies in our space to really become a sustainable culture in the way that they do business.
And does that apply? Does it go all the way up to your board of directors? And is that something that is actually shows up in your annual report where you're measuring and reporting those?
It actually does, and absolutely does. And on a monthly basis, what gets prepared is a corporate-wide, company-wide, for the 15,000 people in Parsons, representing our sustainability leading and lagging indicators, get presented to the board along with our 5 additional core values. And that is discussed at the board to make sure that we're doing and living by what we say we are going to do.
It's a major statement to have that part of your overall compensation program. That changes it. If you haven't been familiar with Dr. Eric Strauss and the program that he's leading in what I call the Urban Eco Lab at LMU, you should become familiar with it. I think, they are at the cutting edge of looking at, the biological, chemical, physical human forces of what we call our resilient economy, and looking at how the urban fabric of in particular a city like Los Angeles is interacting among all of those forces. And I think what he's doing there is just creating a new dialogue about cities and the urban life, and in particular looking at Los Angeles. As we've talked about today, we have this major investment in transportation. We have the major investment that we're making to address our homeless situation. We have a boom in the construction industry and building housing here, but our city is densifying and stuff. So talk a little bit about, Dr. Strauss, of kind of resiliency and sustainability and how we look at the urban fabric different than we have in the past.
Sure, thank you. First of all, it's a delight to be here today, and it was particularly rewarding to hear Mayor Garcetti reinforce the role that reason and science plays an important part in the way that we help to make decisions. And our center, the National Science Foundation, U.S. Department of Education, the Annenberg Foundation, U.S. Forest Service, as well as a dozen others, are central contributors to the development of these ideas that have direct applications in the idea of wellness. And sustainability has been such a potent movement because it's based on common sense. You know, especially early on, there's so much low-hanging fruit in the context of doing commerce that just makes sense with respect to investment and respect to return. And sustainability's caught on. It's been a very powerful movement. But I would also point out that science is a bit chaotic. And especially when we start to look at cities as ecosystems, they're very complex. And in a sense, sustainability comes out of this idea of a linear sort of view of science that we've had all the way back to the time of Newton, that you know, nature's this perfect machine. And really, the perfection of the machine is based on the fact that we don't get to look at it for very long in a human lifetime. And the basic unit of ecology is like 10,000 years. And so we've actually begun to do science long enough to begin to understand just how dynamic systems are. And when we think about how systems change, especially the fabric of an urban landscape where you have this place like Los Angeles, you have over 15 million people who've transformed a landscape in a relatively short amount of time and are living in an incredibly dynamic system, we have to be prepared to understand that the plans and systems we're implementing now may not be resilient over the long haul. And in fact, the chaos that results as we transform systems, the sort of system or cycle of resilience, as we describe it, is actually a tremendous opportunity for business to rethink how work is being done, to rethink how solutions are being approached, and how problems are being solved. And you can see this happening now as the coal industry is really struggling to either be defended against change and is really not being undermined not only by the environmental impacts, but the fact that there are other energy sources that are less expensive. And the alternative to this sort of defensive position is what you see in a place like Los Angeles, this tremendous embrace of the opportunity that happens during this period of reorganization. We call this an ecological release. So as an energy sector is reinventing itself, the talent, the resources, the people, the vocational discernment, all these activities are up for grabs again. So in one sense, we view this as a period of tremendous uncertainty, and it brings with it some fear. But in fact, it's this opportunity for reorganization that results in a much stronger community, a stronger economy, and a better sense of community wellness. And it's really the bringing together these ecological principles and the idea that science and business are not at war with one another. We're actually thinking about the same kinds of outcomes. You know, I think that the 21st century in general, and in fact the events of the political events in this country of the last year have really reinforced the idea that we have tremendous opportunities at the local level. The reemergence of the city-state as the powerful decider in the economies and the lives of people, the incredible densification, which with all of the problems that it brings is actually the solution, not the problem, as we approach 10 billion people. And becomes this model that allows the specialization and all of the kinds of things that make our cities great to live in. So we're really blessed to be in an experimental laboratory like Los Angeles that has so many opportunities and so much talent, and obviously a room full of people who believe the same way. It's a tremendous opportunity.
So we talked about earlier today that the city of Los Angeles County is going to grow by 1.5 million people in the next 25 years, which is doubling effectively the city of Los Angeles. So what are some of the thoughts that you're discussing as to how do you break the mold to really help implement those type of policies that are going to have an impact to deal with the situations that we,
from
the challenges that we have?
You know, from an ecologist position, we think of resources and we think of the competition and interactions among those forces and drivers that impact resources. And as people move into higher density environments, they tend to live in smaller square footage, which is good. They tend to rely more on public infrastructure as opposed to recreating the infrastructure privately in your own backyard as you do in the suburban or rural models. And all of those create efficiencies of scale that scale up dramatically. And so densification is actually an opportunity to improve this efficiency of scale. And there's been a significant amount of work both in the economic and in the ecological side in the academic world that demonstrates that bigger cities are actually opportunities for success. So as people are living in smaller square footage and using more in the way of public resources, those economies are one example. A second is we talk about the need for additional infrastructure, which is absolutely true. But in fact, the infrastructure in Los Angeles is extraordinary. And if we think about transforming our transportation system, and we reduce the number of incidences where you have single individuals driving automobiles, as the roads become less crowded, and the roads actually become quite capable of supporting the distribution and movement of people if you think differently about how you're going to put people in the devices that move them around. And so part of this resilience thinking is to begin to break these problems down into their fundamental elements and then say, what are the existing resources that we have, and how do the local solutions get solved? And if we have an opportunity to talk about a little later in this discussion, this is such a central part. And this is why decentralizing solutions is so important, because the solutions in Los Angeles are going to look different than San Francisco or San Diego, and certainly in communities that are not in Mediterranean climates and so forth. And so decentralizing these solutions and allowing the individual communities a critical role in making those decisions is so important. I mean, the bottom line is we know that the healthiest business communities and the healthiest human communities are where people tell us they love where they live. And that's where we're heading towards. And the mechanical and cultural and social and scientific and economic solutions should be leading to that outcome.
Great comments, and we will come back to that because that's a great discussion. You know, part of our panel here is very involved in renewable energy, looking at efficiency solutions for our buildings and operating. So, Tom, I know you power like 10% of the LA DWP solar power here with your utility scale power. I think the Mount Signal project that you have is the largest utility scale solar project in the world when it's ultimately built out. Can you talk a little bit about just you know, your experience you've learned in investing in the solar renewable solutions, job creation that comes out of that, and where you see that going forward as part of our overall commitment to 30% to 40% of our LADWP power being solar?
Okay, just to clarify, so we do power 10% of Los Angeles during the day, less so at night, but we're proud of that. And we do have power plants up about 70 miles north of here. One fact that makes me personally very proud is that the second phase of that, called Springbok 2, is the first power plant, solar power plant, that is now producing power at a levelized cost that is lower than burning fossil fuels. That's the first.
That deserves a round of applause.
That is a first, and there will be more to come. The cost curve of solar continues to come down. It's a chip technology. Your question was in terms of job creation and how we got there. So our company, what we do is a little different from most developers who kind of go to Wall Street, get some money, and buy some projects and try to, you know, kind of make a quick buck, which is perfectly fine. We kind of, tying into the theme about science, we're extremely engineering focused, and we believe that through better engineering, you can ultimately create more value, both for the customer as well as for our company, and create more jobs, to where we've become the leading independent solar power plant developer, builder, and operator in the country by having better solutions. We also, since I mentioned at night, we don't produce much power. We're also working right now on storage solutions. Obviously, once you have a certain amount of penetration of solar, you have to start thinking about that. In the early days, you don't, because for every power plant we turn on, a gas plant turns theirs back a little bit. Right. But at some point, when we're talking about 30–40% penetration of solar into the grid, then you have to start thinking about engineering solutions to overcome the intermittency, which is obviously energy storage. Right. That technology is becoming available, and we're trying to drive forward by combining solar power plants with battery storage systems to really deliver what the utility is looking for to serve their load.
Yeah, especially if we have a year like we had this year with lots of rain.
With lots of rain. Well, certainly most of the load is in the summer. And fortunately for solar, hot summer days also means a lot of sunshine. So there's a good overlap of solar production in our load. But then in the late afternoon, we do have a gap that we need to close. These power plants produce quite a bit of economic activity where in the areas where we've built them, which is both up in the Antelope Valley as well as in the Imperial Valley, servicing Southern California. We've created thousands of jobs, and it's really fun and fascinating to see when you go into these communities, especially in the Imperial Valley, which was the poorest county in the United States, not just in California, but in the United States. So if you think about, Alabama and all of these, this is the poorest county in the United States. And to just see the economic activity there where, the hotels are all booked out. They're building new hotels. There's a line at the traffic light, which, 5 years ago, people were wondering why they even had a traffic light in their town. Yeah. It's a lot of activity. Each plant takes about a year and a half to build. There's a continuous flow now of new projects coming online to hit the 33% mandate, now the 50% mandate, and soon, hopefully, the 100% mandate for renewable energy in California.
Yeah, which is a great solution. It was interesting when Senator De Leon mentioned in his speech that the renewable jobs in California are greater than the aggregate of coal jobs in the entire United States. So that was an interesting statement. And Jonathan, I know you and Jason worked together on what is the largest in-basin solar program, your Westmont project. Can you talk a little bit about kind of the success of that project, where you see rooftop solar advancing? And Jason, I'd be interested, as the largest rooftop manufacturer in the country, talking about some of the technology that is there that's going to allow us to take advantage of, what in LA County we have over 1 billion square feet of horizontal industrial rooftops that we haven't tapped into, just a fraction of those to take advantage of rooftop solar. So Jonathan, you might start, and then Jason, you can add on.
Oh, great. Thanks, Brad. Well, pleasure to be here. This is a fantastic panel to start out with Walmart and have the leading utility solar provider here, one of the leading battery provider, of course, GAF. Were we going to show a few pictures, or is that later?
You can show pictures.
Oh, okay. They have some pictures. I'm not sure. Oh, okay. If we can just go to the next slide. I was going to give you, it's kind of an honor to be an entrepreneur and be dedicated to the environment and to, thank you. The green? Yeah.
I may only give you a minute for your pictures, but
I can figure this one out. Anyway, it's great to have the opportunity to do these type of projects. This is early in the days, and this was Costco. Costco and Walmart were the early adopters in solar. This was the largest project at the time. It was 3.5 megawatts on one of their distribution centers. It uses an earlier version of our technology. And it was really a thrill to do that. It came with a whole host of interconnect issues, and working with Edison, everyone worked it out. And of course, what I learned is everything works out just great in the end, and everyone's happy, and they get their payback. And I got to commend Walmart. They've really gone on to do a much bigger program, but it was interesting. And the next one shows, after that, recently, a couple years ago, we sort of, and these are companies owning their own system. That was early. People didn't really want to fund them. They did want to fund them. There was issues. This is Forever 21. We did this a couple years ago. This was the largest solar-powered headquarters in the world, 5.2 megawatts. We got together, the city. It was a combination of net metering and FIT, worked with all the regulations. We debuted our solar strap. We had to invent a new technology to make it work with the earthquakes and the codes. And that was really great. Created a lot of jobs. We trained a lot of people. This one is Westmont. This is what we're completing with GAF as our partner and True Green. This is the largest project, we think, in the world, 16.5 megawatts. 4 buildings. We pushed everything. We used high output panels. Put it in context, it powers 5,000 homes, or most of the homes you can see around that area. And it would take about 5 of these would power all the Walmarts built to date. And there's a lot of Walmarts out there. So this has really pushed the boundaries that we think about rooftop solar. You normally used to think that we'd walk in with a Costco at 600 kW is the biggest in the city. Now we talk that a megawatt is small. So the way we're thinking of these projects is changing, and the utilities' views are changing as well. Okay, I'm a little nearsighted, so I have to look back here. The, going back, I just summarized, it did offset the equivalent of about 5,000 home or 6,000 cars. I mean, these are just big, powerful units for an in-basin. And when you combine them with out-of-basin, we start to see a really amazing program. The Los Angeles Business Council came forward to the concept of the feed-in tariff. They forwarded the concept of the bundled fit, and it's really nice to see it working. It created 500 direct jobs on this one project alone, and we put mostly union labor to work, 130 low-voltage electrical jobs. Low voltage just means the normal AC, up to 600 volts AC. 20 high-voltage electrical jobs in the infrastructure, 50 roof welding jobs. That's how we bond our system to the roofs. 10 engineering jobs and 20 solar strap manufacturing jobs. We manufacture in Los Angeles City and Los Angeles County. So that's 200 jobs of those 500 direct. Indirect, it had to be something like 2,000. And this is really just the start of what we think is coming. We just won the convention center. We're in negotiations for that. And that's been on and off for the last 3 years. It was off because they thought they were going to build a football stadium. We're glad they didn't. Yeah. And again, this looks like a really big project. That's 2 megawatts. So 2 compared to 16, real important project. 2 megawatts is still a very big project. Just look at the context of what we're doing. So what's next? We're thinking like, okay, where do we go from here? PermaCity, we really like to be part of the solution. We like to kind of, set the parameters. And we think this bundled concept, call it the 80-20 rule. 8 minute provides 20% of the power out of basin at very, very low cost. And we're gonna kind of ride Tom's horse at that, call it your low cost horse, to create tens of thousands of jobs. And people get to work close to home. And we found that the unions and everyone have really responded to this. They're like, we get the jobs. We're putting thousands and thousands of people to work. We can transition our economy. We're coming up with a proposal that will eliminate 15% of the carbon in Los Angeles. Tom and I brainstormed that. And we think that's going to contribute to all of our success. We think the future is going to see that. And of course, with companies like Susan's and the batteries, that's going to solve the transferring problem. So I can't say how exciting it is just to be with a big group of people, and I'm sure everyone in the audience, and be part of this solution.
Because I'm going to get to Susan after Jason, because Susan, the battery storage is critical, and the integrated systems that Susan's company is doing is critical to making all of this successful. But the rooftops, look at GAF as one of the largest roofing companies in the country. It's, the issues we deal with are water and leakage and penetration of the roofs to install solars on existing older facilities. So talk a little bit about kind of the technology and where you see that headed as a solution to really making rooftop solar a real viable alternative. Get rid of that concern that building owners have about somebody
yes, as you mentioned,
damaging what's underneath my roof.
As you mentioned, GF is the largest roofing manufacturer in the world. It's a privately held company. It's over 130 years old. One of my partners who actually should be here, I'm sitting here, he's right there. He's raising his hand. Thank you, Tony. But having said that, when we looked at the opportunity that the folks at PermaCity had brought to us, there's a lot, my former life, I used to be an investment banker, and as much as your comment earlier, from a financing standpoint, that deal would not have been put together had we not come in with the capital. Yep. So we came in, we looked at the opportunity, we underwrote the entire transaction, and then we brought in some private equity partners to take a piece of that deal. So I think what was important from GF's perspective was where we're using our tax capacity as a means to grow the enterprise value of our core roofing business. So on that building is a brand new GAF TPO roof. Comes with all the warranties and things associated with that. Where we see the business, so again, we're very excited. Mary invited us into the LABC. I think it's been a fantastic relationship, so bow down to you. Thank you very much. But where we see this business going, over the last year, call it last 2 years, we've put about $200 million to work. And over the last 30 months, we've put about close to $300 million to work. That's about $1 billion of transactions that we've financed. And these have primarily been rooftop deals. Where it makes sense, and you want to make sure that you have an alignment of interests with the building owner. It's very, very, very important. So if you're going to put solar on top of a roof, you want to ensure that, and let's say it's going to be a 20-year contract, the life of that building should last. The life of that roof should last beyond 20 years. It makes sense. If not, you create a deleterious outcome for yourself and the investor and the building owner. So what we've done is, that there's also, and again, if you ever want to go to sleep, I can spend some time talking to you about tax equity structuring. I can go into great detail. But you guys look like a very lively audience, so I'll leave that alone. But what we've done at GAF is very important. We ensure that we align our interests, not just with the developer who needs the needed capital, but more importantly with the building owner. So in many structures in the market, people will, at the end of the recapture period, people will sell their interest. GAF doesn't do that. We stay in the transaction for the entire duration of that power purchase agreement. And what that does, we're effectively taking more risk, but we're sitting directly beside our building owner partners, which hopefully should answer some of those questions. What we've also done, over the last, call it 30 months, we've done 73 transactions. So we've been extremely busy, and we look for the best-in-class developers like the PermaCities in each local market. So we've done deals in Connecticut, New Jersey, the list goes on and on, all across. We have a pretty big envelope. And while I say this, and we love PermaCity, we've done fantastic business with them, but Jonathan cannot use all of our capital. So if there are folks in the audience who have, if there are folks
so much for that exclusive.
No.
So much for that exclusive, Jonathan.
No. But we say this in that Jonathan's been a good partner, and but if there are folks who are thinking about getting into space, and if you have good investment opportunity, we're totally open for business. And I say that we're doing a ton of business with Jonathan. I think we're going to spend, without going into detail, Jonathan, somewhere in the, I don't want to, maybe I shouldn't say this, but a lot of money, to say the least.
And are you using renewable energy tax credits as part of that?
Yeah, so we're using, there's something called it's Section 48, it's the investment tax credit. There's a 30% tax credit you get, where we get the preponderance of the tax attributes of a transaction. We also get the income allocation, which is effectively the depreciation. And we also get a little bit of cash associated with those deals. The way we structure this is, it's more accretive for a private equity firm, because whether you're clipping a coupon on a forward-going basis, whether you're monetizing it with back leverage, it's a much better investment. And so again, I spent some time in working on Wall Street, and I always tell people that I'm buying myself back into whatever the afterlife is by doing good things and investing in renewable energy. So I've said that to everyone.
And do you see that tax credit going away as part of our wonderful tax code revision?
Yeah, so there's a saying, and it says, that says, control the things that you can control and have the serenity to accept the things that you cannot. When you think about tax reform, it's unclear. I can't predict what's going to take place in Washington, D.C. What I will tell you, though, is the efficiency in EPC prices coming down, panel prices coming down, et cetera. What that does, you rely less, there's less reliance upon a subsidy and/or a tax credit. And we see that occurring, but again, the tax credit obviously is beneficial for investors in the space.
So Susan, you are running a firm that you helped create that really integrates all these systems. I mean, you look at utility scale of how you deal with load, how you deal with the analytics of analyzing for a company, how they manage that load. You look at storage and integrating the whole solution for them to implement a renewable energy program. And so talk a little bit about some of the cutting edge things that you're doing and how you see that working. And I know you are working very closely with Walmart as part of their rollout on trying to integrate all of those systems to make sure that they're successful in implementing them.
I love batting cleanup, so I love this. Walmart's a great example of where the grid is really being revolutionized by huge consumers like Walmart. I mean, efficiency is the hallmark of the Walmart brand. And so, I mean, from everything, they've redefined the word efficiency, from their supply chains to the way they architect their buildings to, and so energy efficiency is just a natural extension of their whole business model and the success of their business model. So what we do is we take advanced energy technologies like battery storage and software analytics and controls, and we are the economic optimization layer. So we'll design, build, and manage projects using advanced energy storage and software to control the load, basically, to measure, monitor, and control the building load using the distributed resources like solar and battery storage. And what it's able to achieve in terms of efficiencies is probably the most impactful opportunity to reduce carbon and to create and to clean up the atmosphere than I think almost any other measure. Think of it this way. So there's the entire electric grid was built around the single premise that you cannot store energy. Right. And there is so much waste in the system that from the point of generation down transmission level, there's on average about 6% waste, just line losses. From the distribution level down to where it's being consumed, there's another anywhere from 2 to 15% waste in line losses in particular. And then when you get on the customer side of the meter, we've seen anywhere, even with the most efficient users, because they're not controlling their consumption, they're using it in real time, we see anywhere from 5 to 15 to 20% opportunity to reduce energy usage. So if you can control your load, and if you can't see it, you can't measure it. If you can't measure it, you can't control it, right? So by definition, if you're controlling your load, you can just reduce your consumption by 5%. So think about on an entire circuit, it carries about what, 15, 20,000 kilowatts. So if we can reduce load on that circuit by just 5%, it would be half a megawatt. There's 4,500 circuits in Los Angeles alone. Wow. That's 2 gigawatts. It's more than about 2.25 gigawatts of energy that would not have to be generated or consumed with 5% efficiency, half a megawatt on one circuit, right? That's the entire output of the San Onofre nuclear facility. And what we're seeing by harnessing the load with battery storage and firming up the solar, providing permanent peak reduction, so you don't have to build a peaker plant, but you can actually measure and control exactly what your load is going to be. We're able to achieve anywhere from 5 to 10% cost savings, and we're reducing their footprint by 5%. Our average installation behind a meter is 500 kilowatts. So one of those on one circuit would in Los Angeles would take more than 2,000 megawatts off the grid. That's the power of the way battery technology is now coming out of the electric vehicle and the mobile communications industry. Lithium-ion batteries are now ubiquitous, and they're hitting a price point now and a scalability, a modularity, where we can use them in almost any space inside a building to control the load. And it's so new that it's beginning to just revolutionize the way we're managing and consuming the electricity and the way utilities will manage the grid. And those are the biggest achievements in climate change I think we'll see over the next decade.
Yeah, it's interesting. I know, David, you're working with, Parsons is working with UCLA to look at these resiliency plans, as is what Dr. Strauss is working on as well. It'll be interesting on your comments, because Susan's comment is well taken. How do we get business out there to engage into this process to ensure that we can implement these ideas and be successful in managing the load? And I know you guys have been working with UCLA to help shape a program to help businesses deal with it. And then I'd love to hear Dr. Strauss's kind of thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, so really quick, specific to the UCLA case, several years ago we engaged on a series of efficiency projects, a chiller, some things on site that could improve efficiency. I guess going back to how do we take that then to realization, and I'll draw a parallel around what I've seen on transportation infrastructure in terms of efficiencies, is that when you have a global reach and you see sustainability really being a global topic in ways that a lot of owners throughout the world are trying to be more innovative and keep ahead of the game. For example, we do a lot of work in the Middle East, and water is very precious there, and so they're ahead of how do we preserve and protect the water there. And what I've seen with Parsons is our ability to then bring those ideas, those innovations back. And I think as an engineering service provider, our responsibility is to share those practices, share those techniques, share those innovations, and work those back into specifications, work those back with the owners in terms of how these projects should be built, especially when they're contracted, that they're built into a certain performance requirement or a specific specification, and how you want to see those projects result at the end of the day.
And I would add that one of the ways of integrating ecological solutions into some of this technology is to begin to rely more heavily on ecosystem services. You know, these are the elements to human wellness that nature does for us, and if we can facilitate those processes. So you talk about reducing the electrical load in a house using existing technologies. As we envision new houses, we can imagine ventilation systems that are exploiting the natural air currents as opposed to using just this sort of technological solution to homeostasis. You know, people want to be at this temperature, and we're going to use machinery to do that. But we can also use the natural air pattern movements to do so, and those reduce the load of energy demands even more. And let me give you a specific example. There's been a tremendous transformation in the movement away from incandescent lighting towards LED lighting because of its efficiency, its directionality. It's an extraordinary outcome. The miniaturization, it's fantastic. One of the interrupters in this process is that these frequencies of light, certain LEDs, are hypersensitive to communities of animals, including insects, that we rely on for pollination services. And so we have inadvertently created these animal traps that are saving us money, but because of the frequencies they're emitting, they end up insects clogging the systems and literally having significant impacts on biodiversity. So working together, the great thing about an LED is this is a solvable solution. You can tune LED frequencies and create notch filters so that you can actually make these lights totally sort of uninteresting to animals. And so by integrating these kinds of technologies with the demand or the understanding that we need these ecosystem services, we need these insects as pollinators, we can actually come up with even more efficient solutions. Because I think that this is, so for instance, as we transition from our reliance on petroleum and we move more towards electric cars, for instance, that actually then creates a much larger demand on the electric system because it's a new reason that consumers are needing electricity at their homes. So that asks the social question about should we be rethinking transportation needs and solving those transportation needs through virtual engagement and where people live in relationship to where they work and so forth. So these are very integrated solutions of which technology is important but the social fabric is equally critical.
And I want to add something. I mean, something Mr. Barrett said earlier is like really the key, in my view, is just you have to start with the value proposition to the end-use customer. That's right. If you don't design a solution around the, benefiting them in making it not just cost-effective, but an improved value to them, you're going to be in a conundrum where you have to go find money to pay for something. Whereas there's $1 trillion going to be spent on the distribution grid in the United States alone over the next decade. $1 trillion is going to be spent by, there's your trillion, Mr.
I'm
right?
I'm glad you said that because...
but those are $100 billion a year is being spent by the utilities on upgrading the distribution system alone over the next 10, 12 years. So that is, if it's going to be spent anyway, how do you guide it into positive investments that produce the kind of outcomes we're looking for?
Right. Tom, Tom. Oh, sorry, go ahead, yeah. Please.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I'm glad you said that because whenever I sit in front of somebody and this is normally the scary person in the corner, the CFO or the treasurer, and we're having a conversation, and you tell them, look, you have a roof that you have to replace it. And, as much as I work for a roofing company, the last thing you want to replace is your roof. If I can say, look, I can take your roof cost, which is a CapEx, I could effectively amortize that through your utility bill over the course of a 20-year period. So I take CapEx, I turn it to OpEx. You may have $3 or $4 or $5 or $6, $7 million that you can now deploy into an accretive part of your business. So when you when you sit in front of that person and you have that, you make that financial discussion and they can see the return associated with it, then you really have them, and then it makes sense. Key. Absolutely.
Yeah. That's what we do.
Yeah,
we can help you with that.
Tom, go ahead. You had a comment there.
I wanted to kind of do a little bit of a fast forward. What I find exciting, and I think the discussion about efficiency, one aspect that I always feel like is left out is that it's not just about efficiency, but it also increases the quality of life, right? You know, a modern energy efficient air conditioning system is better than the old window thing that, you know, rambles along. So it's not just energy efficient, but it's also quality of life. And you can see that when you're in Europe and you're looking at their very efficient systems, they actually operate much better.
Yes.
So I think that's an important aspect. But fast forwarding, what excites me about where we are right now, in California especially, at the forefront of really finding solutions to these problems, and I think Los Angeles is in a unique position of being, you know, a large city, but also has access to a lot of solar, and both rooftop as well as desert-based. I don't know if you can bring up a couple of slides that I...
Sure, yeah, we'll throw them up real quick. Do you have the slides throw up, though? Maybe, maybe not.
There's one graph that got me into the whole business, what's it, 8 years ago now. It's the very first slide that I wanted to share, and that's at the core of photovoltaic solar technology. And that slide, not looking very good.
You can talk us through it.
That slide shows the last 40 years of cost decline of solar photovoltaic technology. And what a lot of people forget, they always think PV, solar is kind of a new thing. It's 40 years old. It was invented in the United States. And quite frankly, for, you know, the first 30, 35 years, you know, it didn't really do much in terms of the grid because it was so expensive. But the fact people talk about solar has come down recently in cost, no, it's been coming down for 40 years. This is not a new phenomena. So the obvious question is, where is this going? Where will this be in 20 years? The answer is, power generation will effectively become free. We're going to have access as the human race to free energy. Actually, to be precise, we always had. The sun is always shining, right? So we never had to pay for that.
Unlimited sustainable energy.
But we will have unlimited, sustainable, clean energy with a bunch of issues. You know, it only shines at daytime, et cetera, et cetera. So we need energy storage systems. We need better grid. We need, you know...
Soon we have $1 trillion to invest to bring the grid up.
You can fund the storage system.
Thank you.
Well, we'll be building a lot of those. So if you look today at the cost of levelized cost of energy, wind onshore is very competitive. Solar utility scale is right there in the 4 to 6 cent range. Gas combined cycle right now is already above. Coal is higher if you look at the full cost of coal. Nuclear, you know, it's not even worth mentioning. It's so expensive, not just because nuclear is a risk and all of that good stuff, but nuclear is just simply too expensive. That's today. So you can fast forward that 10, 20 years, and yes, the investment tax credit will go away. It's currently scheduled to be phased out in 2021 to 22. But even if somebody pulls the plug earlier, it doesn't really matter. You can't stop that train. This cost is coming down, and it's coming down every year. And the technology is getting better and better. If you look at the next slide, conventional technologies, everything fossil fuel is basically people, you know, pulling gas out of the ground or digging coal out of the ground and burning it and building big machines to do that. That's all getting more expensive over time.
So it's interesting that how do we deal with the, I always say the social equity piece of this. You know, in LA City, we have over 400,000 small businesses that operate here. Big business gets this. Big business is investing in these alternative solutions because they realize everything we've been talking about on the panel. A lot of the small businesses that operate out there don't see this as being directly beneficial to them. How do we message that? How do we create and ensure that we have the social equity piece as part of our policy and our deliverable of this.
So here's an example. Look at PermaCity. PermaCity is a local company, and they partnered with the largest roofing manufacturer in the world. We're a multi-billion-dollar company. Jonathan is growing his business based upon his ability to procure these opportunities. So I think one of the best examples is, and I'll say, your firm, Jonathan,
thanks.
and what you're doing.
Should I clap for myself? Yeah, thanks. I mean, it's been a wonderful experience. I mean, if you look at the small business aspect, we knew that 5 years ago, it was a remote dream to do these projects. Everyone fought over them. Policy, it was too expensive, it was this, it was that. And now we have small business, fabrication shops, adding employees, fabricating not offshore, but here in town. So they're happy, adding staff. We have contractors, or subcontractors of all different sizes performing work. And quite frankly, there's the huge labor component. I don't know the exact number, but I imagine we have more than 30,000 people in significant labor unions that want to work in the city. They've been included now, so they're behind the whole thing. And they have training programs. So I think the social aspect is, it's not always going for the cheapest form of power. I think we did that with the fossil fuels. It's really about solar power, and the other renewables are, as Tom said, are free, basically. So how are we going to have the social justice? We're going to have a mix that on a social point of view, gets everyone on the same page, everyone aligned. We're going to do the storage. That's going to create a lot of jobs. And we're going to learn to use a whole new form of free power that doesn't deplete the planet. And we're going to create thousands and thousands of really good jobs in the process. That's what, well, the former president was talking about. That's what the mayor talks about. And companies like JF and others have stood up and are willing to put their money right behind it. And,
well, I think also we're creating the engineering solutions, and we're creating them right here in Los Angeles, and we're exporting that. We're developing a power plant right now in Bangladesh, and we have a team in India. And the engineering is done here in LA and in California. So this is a huge opportunity. If you think about the cost implications of solar power getting cheaper and cheaper, it's not a question of if solar will be the dominant form of producing power. It's only a question of when, who do I compete with, how much sunshine do I have, et cetera, but it's going to happen everywhere. And just like Silicon Valley is the headquarter for IT, Los Angeles has the opportunity to be the headquarter for engineering solutions, because somebody has to figure out how do I do a battery integrated system behind the meter? How do I engineer the most efficient rooftop system, et cetera? All of those solutions will create a lot of jobs, and we can export that know-how into the rest of the country and the world.
I want to go around real quick. We're running out of time, unfortunately. I'm going to look for my DWP bill, Tom, to be zero relatively soon. So, I want to just one around question. Change happens much faster than we think. We all like to think, 8, 10 years out. But if we come back to this symposium in 2 years, what's the one idea or the new change or the dramatic thought out there of what our future is going to look like that we think that we're not talking about today? Do you have a thought on that, David? I want to run around real quick as to what's going to be a radical game changer for us.
Yeah, I do have a thought on that. And technology was a very strong theme in this conversation today, especially around solar power. And technology, I think, is playing a significant role in transportation infrastructure. When you start talking about connected vehicles, you start talking about smart cities, and also the way lighting and transportation and efficiencies of getting people from place to place. I think transportation technology is going to be a big topic. It already is. I think we're going to see more development of that over the next 2 years.
I think the great opportunities we see, the technological efficiencies increase and the costs, say the production of energy goes down, it allows us to invest that capital into the social sphere. We talk about social justice, and so the transformation of a modern community into one in which a larger proportion of people have middle-class jobs as a result of technology and the capital that frees up for training, that's the great opportunity of an integrated suite of solutions.
So I'm a practical guy. I'm going to be very specific. I think 2 years from now, we're going to see a clear path and a lot of implementation to about 30% more carbon reduction, thanks to LABCs and you know, Brad and the board and the former people, and getting the fit and the success with the bundle fits, which Westmont, this large park, is part of. And I think 20%, we're going to keep that 80-20. 20% is going to create those jobs that everyone likes, and we're going to rely on companies like Tom's to continue to drive, again, I said ride his horse earlier, to the combination of the two creates the social justice, it creates the jobs, and it creates a lower cost for the ratepayers. So I'm hoping and pretty sure we're going to see that. That's faster than expected.
Susan?
I think what we're not really talking about yet is the role of the consumer in these markets, and I think that the role of the consumer in choosing their electricity and how they consume, what they consume, is going to be a very powerful force that is going to disrupt markets in ways we haven't even started talking about. They're going to dictate this market.
Yeah, great comment. Tom?
I think IT is going to play a huge role. I think artificial intelligence, integrating all these systems together, I think is going to play a huge role, and it's going to both drive efficiencies, but also drive the value of the product delivered.
Yeah, I think there's going to be, and hopefully we play a leadership role, there's going to be an integrated rooftop system that when you look at solar panels and roofs and you're integrating that. I didn't bring any of our slides. We're launching a product called Decotech that begins to start that discussion. And you know, hopefully you'll see more of it. But again, it's having something that, you know, and having something that is cheap enough for people. As a person who came from a single family, I don't think we could afford to have solar in our house. And so I think as we move further out, having an integrated rooftop system that, you know, is affordable for low to moderate income folks, I think is something that I'd like to see.
Great. Well, please, big round of applause for the panel. We could talk for another 2 hours. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you all very much. Appreciate it.
Ladies and gentlemen, today's MC, Ivan Penn.
Well, we hope you enjoyed the summit today. I would like to thank you all for coming and attending Los Angeles Business Council's 11th Annual Sustainability Summit. We heard and saw a new way of building a clean energy future with 5 points net zero, new hall, and our first panel. Our state leaders, Javier Becerra and Senate President Pro Tem Kevin De Leon, explored California's path forward on climate policy under the new administration. We also saw an outstanding panel of regulators who laid out their plan to achieve our ambitious 2030 goals. Then our very own Mayor Eric Garcetti described how LA is leading major cities in clean energy policies and job creation, and our role on the broader stage. We also saw how major businesses, including JPMorgan Chase and Walmart, are doubling down on their commitment to investing in sustainability, as well as how private sector leaders are creating new technologies, providing cheap renewable energy, and expanding their sustainable portfolios. Please join me now in thanking our speakers, co-hosts, and all of the sponsors for today's event. Now, we want to remind you to read the LABC Institute's new report by Dr. Michael Stoll on the LABC website, and use the summit hashtag LABC Sustainability Summit for all your social media. Thank you to Mary Leslie and her team for putting together this great event, and thank you all for joining us and being an integral part of the 11th Anniversary Summit. This concludes today's program. Now we ask that you please join us for lunch on the veranda, and we hope to see you at next year's Sustainability Summit.